Productive Pastor 68 Tips for Seminary. Hey friends, welcome back to Productive Pastor. Chad here. Got an episode about tips for seminary. You know, I was thinking about this a couple weeks ago and I realized I've always wanted to do this sort of content, and this is the time of the year where I started seeing folks kind of getting prepped, moving, getting excited, all of those sorts of things, and realized this is the perfect time for an episode about seminary. And some of it's just like, even if you're not starting seminary back, these are things that are helpful for anybody who is in a vocation that requires learning and thinking and saving. So keep buckled up. We've got a surprise too. I'll tell you more about that a little bit before we head into it. But this is going to be a little bit different episode. We've got some different contributors than normal as well. Second thing, are you on the Productive Pastor email list? I send this out every Tuesday, and it has a monthly focus that we kind of drill down into every week. But I also share other things I'm writing, other opportunities for you across the place. I hear from people all the time saying, hey, Chad, when do I find out about X? Or how do I know about Y? That sort of a thing. The Productive Pastor email list is that, but it's also a place where there's a different depth of content that happens, that goes on. And so I want to encourage you to cruise over. There's a link in the show notes, revchadbrooks.com/PPP/068, where you can sign up for the Productive Pastor email list. You'll find out about the Trello course because that's coming out hot in a couple of weeks. That's on there. So just go over there if you're not grabbed that yet. You know, make sure you jump on. The fun other part we have at this podcast is I actually asked a question in Productive Pastor community about tips they would share to other folks going to seminary as well. And I'm going to read those at the back end of this episode. But let's go into this content about tips for seminary. Now, before we jump into this, you know, I know there's the folks that love a good Jesus juke, that sort of stuff. From the very top end, I'm going to let you know these are practical tips. Okay, there's so much more to seminary, whether it's a residential or a virtual or some sort of a hybrid model that is helpful, that I love. But this can be practical stuff. My first suggestion would always be for folks from seminary to use the language of Mr. Wesley to stay in love with God. So we're going to get into the practical side of that right now. I had a fantastic seminary experience. I liked seminary so much, I squeezed 3 years into 5 years and kept hanging out. So I believe deeply in seminary as a formative thing. And so don't want to knock the process at all. But that's for a different conversation, different episode. So 4 things I want to share with you. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the Productive Pastor community and hear from the folks there about the suggestions that they would have. If you don't know about the Productive Pastor community, you can find that on Facebook. There's also a link in the show notes. But as I like to call it, the Productivity Party, it's a great group of over 1,000 pastors that are there to talk about what does it mean to be in ministry and productivity in a healthy way. So these things are not ranked because in some ways these things are a little interdependent with each other. So full disclosure, number 1, you need to think about having some sort of a learning management ecosystem. Now, this sounds kind of crazy, but trust me, you're about to spend years and a lot of money on your education. You want this stuff to last longer than the time you are there. And in 2023, there are so many tools and resources that weren't available to folks for the longest time that are here for you now. So, you know, think about this. It's a question, you know, how are you going to take notes? Think through that. Are you a paper person? That's great. I started out seminary as a paper person and very quickly realized that, you know, that was a difficult thing to do. When you're thinking about what you're going to do to take notes in class, you need to think through what's going to help you do it quickly, but also is what's going to help you do it in a variety of ways. If I were going back to seminary now, I would take my notes in GoodNotes 6. There's other tools I would use, other tools I'm going to talk about later in this episode, but I would use GoodNotes 6 with my iPad. I bring in with the magic keyboard, whole 9 yards. You can type with it. You can import slides. You can annotate PDFs. You can do all the things inside of it. But whatever you choose to do, if you're going to go digital, which is what I recommend, what I would also recommend is make sure that whatever you do this in has the ability to recall information. It needs to have searchability. Trust me, you're going to want to be able to search and find these things, because this is where some of the secret sauce happens. When you are writing papers, when you are doing other work, when you're able to, if you're only using the learning you're learning for that class, it's going to limit yourself to things. But if you can refer to other resources, to other books, to other things you've learned, all that sort of stuff, that's going to instantly multiply the ability of things you have to do your work. And if you have the ability to search for stuff quickly, it's going to just amplify that automatically. So first thing, the management ecosystem is to think, how are you going to take notes? Second thing, how are you going to save things? Now, I don't know about you. I'm 43. This is fairly standard to me now, and with most of the ways computer works now, it's difficult to not do this. But friends, make sure you save your stuff in the cloud. Make sure you save your stuff. I lost a hard drive with the first 3 years of my seminary education on it, and I still, to this day, lament the fact that I lost that hard drive, and the papers and the notes and the work and all of the things are gone. Now, I'm not going to go through the money to try to recover. I think I threw the hard drive away by now. I don't even have it in my possession anymore. But whatever you do, make sure you're backing stuff up on the cloud. It's a big part of that management ecosystem. The last thing is this: develop a file structure. And this is as simple as just having a folder for the year, and then subfolders for semesters, and then subfolders of that for classes. Have a file structure, because when you want to try to find this stuff, whatever you do, the papers, all the things later on, it's going to make it a lot easier if you have this. So your learning management ecosystem matters, but really it's about how are you going to take notes and how are you going to organize yourself. Think through that seriously. I am a iPad person on GoodNotes 6. I love the flexibility of both writing on things and typing in things and annotating on things. So there's other resources you can use that with and do that with, but that's what I would like to do. Second thing is a reading system. You're about to read a bunch, and I mean a bunch. You're going to need a reading system. A lot of stuff's on Kindle now. What I did not know when I was going into seminary was our textbooks weren't really textbooks. They were just normal books. Now, Amazon released the Kindle while I was in the middle of seminary, so all of this stuff wasn't really available to you. I think I got an iPad my second to last year, if not my last year of seminary. So much of this stuff was new when I was in school. But I recommend that you go ahead and sign up for Readwise. It works and integrates with so many other services. There's a great video from YouTube that I'm going to link to in the show notes from Ali Abdal about how he uses the Readwise integration for reading. Just go ahead, follow it, just line for line. Trust me, you will find it to be just really, really important. And that's how you can use that to just consolidate the digital reading that you do. Now, but I'm also a paper reader, and sometimes paper might be cheaper. Sometimes you might just want to use paper, or a book might not be available in Kindle. And when you have to read in paper, what's going to be worthwhile for you is to develop a note-taking system. I color code my note-taking, and it needs to be the same in every single book. If you get on Instagram, you will find tons of people who annotate books and that sort of thing. It's a beautiful thing. You can get lost inside of it. All of that sort of thing. But like, I always use the exact same colors for my reading. The last part of that reading system is you need to have a review system. This goes back into your management idea of system, that sort of stuff. When you get done reading a book, whether it's the notes you've taken in it or other places like this, set aside 30 minutes to just go back and highlight and reflect and save the parts of the book that will be necessary, not just for the project you're working on right now, but also for the things you might be doing in the future in which you want to be using said book for that. This is the place to take advantage of just kind of your larger management ecosystem with how you're taking notes in class, but how you're also saving stuff. And that leads us into a different thing, how you will be saving notes. Now, Grant, I'm about to tell you to use two different things here, but you're going to hear my reasoning why. Remember, every single note system has to be used, has to have searchability features. And if you are never going to want to do anything hand drawing or annotating, for your note taking, then you can 100% use some sort of a digital note taking tool. Now, I love Evernote. I've been considering, I started using Evernote at the very end of seminary, and I wish I would have had it throughout all of seminary, but I'm now one of those people who's considering exiting from Evernote. Now, I don't think Apple Notes will be sufficient in this space. It might be, you can draw on it, you can type it, it fits all the things. I just don't know if you can build a healthy enough of a file structure up for Apple Notes. The second thing is Readwise is going to want to import stuff into Notion, into Evernote, into Roam, into Obsidian, that sort of thing. As far as, and I've researched this out, I don't think Readwise imports into Apple Notes just yet. If I had to pick one thing to move into seminary with, what I think it would be Notion. Just because you can build up those databases, the file structure saving is simple. You can access it on all the devices. It's easy to use. It's beautiful, all those sorts of things. But you're going to need some sort of digital note to save these book highlights, to save your review notes, that sort of thing. You might as well use it if you can for typing, if you're not going to be a handwriter. And so that whole idea of your learning ecosystem, your reading system, and your note-taking system, all three of those kind of semiotically live in the same reality. But the better you are able to categorize, to take notes, and to save notes from your reading, your projects, your lectures, all of those sorts of things, the better you'll be set up and the better you'll be able to take advantage of what you're doing there the most. And so all those first three kind of live together semiotically. The fourth one is different. It's time management, because this is the thing. I remember my first couple weeks in seminary, I was absolutely amazed at the amount of reading I was having to do. I was complaining about it to a friend, and he was like, "Oh yeah, there's a maximum page requirement for classes." And I looked, and our teacher was absolutely blowing through the maximum page limit for what we were supposed to be reading every single week. And he actually had us reading a bunch, using a timesheet for our reading, and also submitting our reading notes at the end of the semester. But I'm glad he did that. I was at Asbury. Al Coppage took him 3 times. I loved it, learned so much from it. But I had to learn about time management very quickly on in my seminary career. The first step of this is you're going to have to learn how long does it take you to do something. You might be a fast reader. You might be a slow reader. There's all sorts of folks who will talk about grad school style reading. I'm going to link to a article I've wrote earlier about how to read complicated things. That might be helpful for you as you process through that. But with every single thing you do, with your writing, your reading, your coursework, all those sorts of things, and if you're working a job while you're there, you need to begin to get an understanding of how long does it take for you to do things. I would recommend a time audit, but I've got free resources for that. I'll have a link to those in the show notes, but you need to get that idea of what does it mean, because you need to be realistic about the time you have, about the things you say yes to, about the ways you're ordering your time, because grad school is bigger than undergraduate school. There's a different expectation. Depending on your program, it might just straight punch you in the learning gut for the moment. But the first step of that really is to understand how long does it take you to do things. The second thing is learn about time block planning. Cal Newport is the best person. Deep Work, you can follow his podcast. He has a time block planner that you might find helpful and might enjoy using. But this is the idea of you are building out and scheduling the space to do the things that you need to be doing. Time management is going to be a key. What you don't want to do is always be behind, because it's exhausting. It's gonna get you docked in grades, and that might be a big thing to you, might not be a big thing to you. But your ability to manage your time is just going to be crucial, and it's going to help it not be so stressful. It's going to help it to where you can spend time with other folks. You can build relationships with professors, with classmates. You can spend time in chapel if you're at a residential school and getting that experience. It's going to be so much easier, but the thing you're going to have to do is be able to start managing your time. And so I'd encourage you, look up at Cal Newport, see what he has to say about time block planning. It's going to make things just a lot easier for you. So I asked the question in Productive Pastor Community about what tips, suggestions would folks have to offer people who are going into seminary. And this is a great thread. It's super, super helpful. I'd encourage you to go over there and find that if you want to. I'm going to go through some of the highlights that are here. Now, if I am mispronouncing your name, I apologize. I still love you so much. Thanks for commenting. But John Shughart said this. He talked about Zotero. It's a software to use for citations for papers. Let me tell y'all what, it's amazing. It builds your biographies for you. It is huge. I loved when I was in seminary. We came back from reading week, Thanksgiving break, and our professor told us that he spent the entire week building this 400 resource bibliography for something he was working on. And after class, I showed him Zotero, and he had this sunken look in his face when he realized he could have done this on Amazon in like 45 minutes. So Zotero, Zotero, it's a great tool. My friend Amanda Smith, talked about cataloging and saving your work. It's huge. You want to go back to the previous stuff, and you don't want to waste that. Kelly McQuaig, schedule out your reading. This goes back into the time block planning piece of this. Like you look inside of it and you plan out what you're going to do today. Kelly just goes deep into some of the pieces about this. I encourage you to check this out. Matt Stout, one of my buddies, me and Matt were side by side through seminary. Talked about he loved Readwise. I love Readwise. I wish I would have had it in school. Chris Melrose talked about how he learned Greek vocabulary while he was driving each day. Vocab was something I had to carve out so much time for. It was just huge. Brian Copeland said, just don't get crushed by perfectionism. And that's such a true thing, to not get just, you're there to learn, you're there to grow. He also talks about how the earlier you start with your Bible software, the better. And Accordance Bible took care of stuff. My friend Toby Gwynn said to find a study group and to develop just the reading and sharing this. I learned the grad student skim. Toby, the grad student skim is legit and it's real. Chad Foster, me and Chad were in school together. He has tons and tons of highly practical stuff inside of his comment. But what I love is he talked about finding a junior faculty member to invest in the relationships and how much that helped him grow. I'll tell you, I did the same thing. Become friends with the faculty at the levels that they're comfortable with. You're going to trust it. Kyle Bowman, just structure your time. And he said, if he could go back, he'd treat it like a 9 to 5 job and just plan it out. You're there for a season. You're there to do the work. Do the work. My friend Chad Bowen said, if you use paper books, write in them. Read your books, tear your books up, all the things. Shelley Thompson said nap. Shelley, I remember I had a secret place in the library where I would nap sometimes. It was great. Josh Walker just talks about building in breathing room, knowing especially like if at the end of a semester you have to plan out for that, what it was like to do that while he was also inside of ministry. Jonathan Brown talks about Tiago's para method. Tiago Forte just had a book come out on the para method. It's great. You can look at Amazon, find that up. It is beautiful. He also brings up Readwise yet again. Now, Randy Timmerman has a suggestion that I love, and I did. And he said, unconventional thought here. Find things outside of seminary to invest your creative and personal time in. So when you come back to your seminary work, you're refreshed, replenished, and ready to engage. I did the same thing. I found a couple of things that had nothing to do with school, had nothing to do with academics that I could be absolutely fascinated with, and it helped me breathe so much more. And that's what we got from the Productive Pastor community. I told y'all, it's the Productivity Party. They're awesome. They're amazing. So I'd encourage you, go hang out there, read those things of your own. But if you're starting seminary now, if you're in seminary, if you want to be in seminary, or if you're just learning so much from this idea of what does it mean to have an intentional thought process about how we learn, thanks for listening to this episode. So we want to put it together, this kind of content for several years, and realize this is the perfect time, Chad. Let's get this episode together, throw it out. So make sure to come back next week. Episode 69 will be here as always, Productive Pastor. Have a good one.